One introduction: RAWZEP. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the eco-design wood stove, and international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWZEP. Purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or RAWZEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWZEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning, and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, residents against wood smoke emission particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Web 57DHYAFZZFLS April 7, 2026 Ukraine attacks on Russian oil curb, Iran war windfall. In this webisode, 1 United States Trump remarks on Easter Day, 2 Texas, why does not Texas, the leader of onshore wind energy, have any offshore? The embattled resource had high-profile antagonists in Texas before Trump took office, 3 Ukraine attacks on Russian oil curb, Iran war windfall, 4 Ukraine daily, the Russian war against Ukraine neutralization of inflated cost fraud in the gas sector main content. 1 United States Trump remarks on Easter Day excerpts edited by residents against would smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization Heather Cox Richardson April 6, 2026. It is really difficult to cover him in a way that conveys how unhinged he is. Political journalists are trained to think, okay, what did he say that was newsworthy? So you convey that to your audience, but in reality when you actually watch his rallies you see that they are full of hatred. He is lying constantly, and a lot of it is incoherent. At the traditional White House Easter egg roll this morning, the Trump right hand was swollen and covered with makeup after his weekend away from the cameras. We have broken every record on the stock market, we have broken every record on our military, and then he launched into a speech about Iran and wars and bombing and rescues. The blank eyes of the Easter Bunny seemed first shocked and then desperate. It was a scene out of a surreal movie. The President of the United States describing a war next to a giant rabbit with big vacant eyes. Every day, I think that there is no possible way it can get dumber and more embarrassing, and then Trump does something like this. And yes, this is real, it is all too real. While the children were rolling their eggs along the ground with spoons, Trump spoke to reporters telling them about Iran. If it were up to me, I would like to keep the oil. I just do not think the people of the United States would really understand. He suggested that attacking the infrastructure of Iran would not be a war crime because they killed 45,000 people in the last month, more than that it could be as many as 60. He claimed again that former presidents are telling him they wish they had done what he did in attacking Iran, all for living. Presidents before him have denied speaking to him, sitting with children drawing pictures. He told them they could sell his autograph on eBay for $25,000. Trump did not deliver much information to the journalists packed into the room about negotiations or goals, or the Trump ultimatum that Iran must agree to his demands by 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday, April 7, 2026 night, or face obliteration. Trump reiterated the entire country could be taken out in one night, and that night might be tomorrow night, but I cannot reveal the plan to the media. Trump has said Iranians are upset when the strikes stop, and a reporter challenged him to explain why would they want you to blow up their infrastructure to cut off their power? He answered they would be willing to suffer that in order to have freedom. The Iranians have, and we have had numerous intercepts. Please keep bombing. Bombs that are dropping near their homes, please keep bombing. Do it. And these are people that are living where the bombs are exploding, and when we leave and we are not hitting those areas, they're saying please come back, come back, come back. A special operations team located and killed Osama bin Laden, the founder of Al-Qaeda and the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks on the United States in 2011 when Barack Obama was president. The Trump frequent claim that his book called for a raid against Osama bin Laden has been just as frequently debunked as a lie. Today was an exhausting day as Americans seem to have little choice but to pay attention to a man who is bizarrely threatening what appear to be war crimes against Iranians while spinning wild tales. The members of both chambers of Congress are away for another week, and Republican leaders are showing no sign of calling them back, leaving the American people to face whatever Trump has in mind for tomorrow. On our own comparison of Trump to Mamdani, in contrast to the Trump vision of government, according to the whims of a single man, no matter how bonkers those whims might be. New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani, who, as a naturalized citizen, is not eligible for the presidency, is illustrating what it means to have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The Mamdani videos about governing New York City inform New Yorkers about what their government does at the same time, though they lift up and honor the workers who make the wheels of government turn. 2 Texas, why does not Texas, the leader of onshore wind energy, have any offshore? The embattled resource had high-profile antagonists in Texas before Trump took office. Excerpts edited by residents against would smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times, April 2, 2026. Texas state officials have led a successful and concerted effort to prevent offshore wind developments in the Gulf over the last few years. Key leaders whose signatures and support are required to permit energy developments off the coast signal to investors that such approvals would be unlikely. So even as 5 offshore wind projects resume construction this month after a federal judge blocked the Trump stop work order for the developments, Texas has none in the mix. The U.S. has a small number of projects operating off the East Coast, totaling some 40 gigawatts. Texas leads the nation in wind energy, producing more than a fifth of the U.S. wind-sourced electricity. Studies show the region could have similar success offshore, especially given the Texas experience building oil and gas rigs in the Gulf. Yet an auction of federal seabed leases nearly 3 years ago saw no bids. While there are a myriad of reasons no offshore wind projects are operational or underway off the coast of Texas, experts say chief among them is the political hostility from state leaders and, more recently, the federal government toward this type of renewable energy. Other opposition against offshore wind comes as the state anticipates up to 5 million more residents by 2036 and a growing queue of large energy users seeking to connect to the Texas grid. A 2025 poll by Texas A&M University at Galveston found that 71% of Texans support wind development off the Texas coast. One of the study authors, Elizabeth Nyman, an associate professor of maritime studies, said the state has about half the technical capacity of the Gulf for offshore wind thanks to its long shoreline, enough to meet more than 160% of the 2025 energy needs of Texas. Of the 600 Texas residents polled, more than 3/4 ranked both on and offshore wind in the top 5 energy sources they would like the state to incentivize. 3 Ukraine attacks attacks on Russian oil curb Iran war Windfall excerpts edited by residents against would smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The New York Times, April 7, 2026. Ukraine ramps up attacks on Russian oil aiming to curb Iran war Windfall. As the Persian Gulf conflict boosts the oil revenue that finances the Moscow war against Ukraine, the Kiev forces are striking at the ability of Russia to refine and ship its crude aerial drone attacks, forcing a major Russian oil terminal to halt operations. Sea drones damaging tankers linked to Moscow strikes, igniting refineries across western Russia as Moscow benefits from soaring oil prices and an easing of U.S. sanctions as a result of the war in Iran. Ukraine is trying to offset the windfall by escalating strikes on Russian oil assets. Experts describe a campaign unprecedented in scale, with Ukraine claiming responsibility for 10 attacks last month, though the true number is probably higher. The most significant strikes have hit the Baltic ports of USD Luga and Primorsk in Russia, which handle roughly 40% of the seaborne crude exports of Russia. Local authorities reported damage at both ports, and the number of tankers loading oil there has plummeted. The Kiev calculation is simple: every barrel of Russian oil that cannot be exported is money Moscow cannot spend on war. In a statement, the Ukraine Defense Ministry described coordinated precision strikes aimed at depriving the Kremlin of billions of dollars that are directly converted into missiles and ammunition. The reality is more complicated, energy analysts say, because Russia taxes oil extraction, not oil sales. That means striking ports and tankers hurts companies selling and shipping the oil, but could leave the government revenue of Russia nearly intact. Cutting oil exports of Russia also risks driving global prices higher by straining an oil market already squeezed by the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran. The tax rate on oil extraction in Russia is tied to market prices, so higher prices equal higher government revenue. Strikes on Russian ports reduce exported volumes, but less volume leads to an increase in prices. Ukrainian officials argue that Russian Baltic Sea exports are a small fraction of global supply, so they have little effect on prices. The Ukraine drone forces have said their goal is to cause enough damage to export infrastructure to force Russia to pump less oil, reducing state revenue. If they can sustain this string of attacks, it could be a game changer, said Sergei Vakulenko, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center in Berlin, but that remains to be seen. In the short run, Russia can keep pumping and store the excess until its export systems recover, but it has limited storage capacity, said Vakulenko, a former top manager at Gazprom Neft, one of the largest oil producers in Russia, with significant long-lasting export disruptions. He said at some point Russia would have to curtail its production. The latest strikes by Ukraine build on a strategy of hitting Russian oil assets that began at the start of 2024. Early attacks aimed to disrupt fuel supplies to Russian forces and to bring the war closer to home for ordinary Russians by causing gasoline shortages. As the campaign expanded along with the growing fleet of long-range drones of Ukraine, the impact began to mount. By last September, the strikes had destroyed or damaged roughly 20% of the refining equipment of Russia. At the same time, a series of setbacks battered the oil industry of Russia. Global prices fell. Washington imposed sanctions on the two largest oil producers in Russia and pressed India to stop buying Russian crude, and Europe tightened its crackdown on the shadow fleet of tankers Russia uses to evade sanctions. As a result, the oil and gas revenues of Russia fell by nearly a quarter last year, opening a significant hole in the Russian budget. In Kiev, optimism grew that the economy of Russia might finally break down after years of surprising resilience. There are lots of positive results against the Russian economy. Vladislav Vlasic, the top sanctions advisor to President Volodymyr Zelensky, told Western diplomats in January during a presentation outlining the economic downturn of Russia less than 2 months later. As the United States and Israel went to war against Iran, the picture suddenly brightened for Moscow and worsened for Kiev. To ease the energy shock caused by the effective blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the United States temporarily lifted sanctions on Russian oil already at sea by the middle of March, allowing it to be shipped worldwide. Zelensky condemned the move, warning that it would help finance the Russian war effort. The Trump administration countered that it would not directly benefit the Russian budget because the oil at sea had already been taxed. The United States has kept sanctions in place on Russian oil that had not left port by the middle of March. European Union countries have also maintained their sanctions. Still, disruptions to Persian Gulf oil supplies have boosted demand for Russian oil among countries that do not apply the Western sanction regime, including China and India. Combined with rising global oil prices, this means more money for the Russian government. Vakulenko of the Carnegie Center estimated that if production levels hold steady, the Russian government could collect at least $12.8 billion in oil taxes in April, double the revenue of March. As the Iran war drags on and the energy shock deepens, Washington may prolong its sanction relief, currently set to expire in the middle of April, and broaden it to allow more Russian oil exports. The same time, Ukraine is trying to clog every Russian export route. The Ukrainian army claimed major strikes on the USD Luga and Primorsk oil terminals on the Baltic Sea on 4 days in late March. Rerouting exports from the Baltic would be difficult because many alternative routes are either offline, like a big pipeline supplying Eastern Europe, or under threat from Ukrainian attacks like ports on the Black Sea. Attacks on oil tankers linked to the shadow fleet of Russia have recently been reported in the Black Sea. Ukraine has not claimed responsibility, but analysts believe Kiev is behind the assaults, noting that its forces have increasingly used this type of attack. These strikes are disrupting the export system of Russia in a measurable way, said Vlasic, the Ukrainian sanctions official. We are seeing reduced tanker loadings, irregular port operations, and even empty days at key ports of Primorsk and USD Luga, something highly unusual for these hubs. This is about degrading reliability and increasing costs. Vlasic said strikes in the last week of March had cost Russia more than $500 million in damage to oil storage facilities and reduced export revenues for Russian companies by $745 million. Another question is whether the Western allies of Ukraine will tolerate the strikes, given the added pressure they place on global oil markets. Zelensky said that he had received signals from some partners about reducing our responses against the oil and energy sector of Russia. He said Kiev would reduce Ukrainian responses if Moscow also stopped attacks on the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. The destruction has continued unabated. On Friday, Ukraine said emergency power outages had been introduced following a massive missile and drone attack that hit the energy grid of Ukraine. 3 days later, a Russian Black Sea oil terminal was on fire following a Ukrainian night drone attack. For Ukraine Daily, the Russian war against Ukraine neutralization of inflated costs fraud in the gas sector excerpts edited by residents against with smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization Kyiv Independent April 7. 2026 local residents looks at a bus damaged by a Russian Shahid drone near a public transport stop in Kharkiv on April 6. 2026 Ukraine proposes energy ceasefire to Russia. Zelensky says if Russia is ready to stop strikes on our energy infrastructure, we will be ready to respond in kind. This proposal has been conveyed to the Russian side through the Americans. President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine targets Russian frigate oil rig amid overnight Black Sea attack. Military says the frigate was allegedly struck in the port of Novorossiysk during an overnight mass attack that also saw the Sheskari's oil terminal once again set ablaze. Novorossiysk port on fire again as Ukrainian strike campaign on Russian oil export infrastructure continues. The Sheskari's oil terminal was struck by Ukrainian drones. Independent Russian Telegram news channel Astra reported citing eyewitness reports from the area. Ukrainian drones reportedly strike Russian military-linked chemical plant. The Mini-Dobrenia plant was reportedly struck. The facility produces ammonia, ammonium nitrate, and nitric acid, which are key components of explosives and ammunition. Syrsky visits frontline hotspot in contested corner of Dnipropetrovsk. Oblast Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky said that Ukraine has retaken 480 square kilometers and 12 settlements since late January amid heavy fighting on key frontline sectors. Ukraine exposes suspected $6.8 million fraud in gas sector. Former managers at the state-owned Ukrgazvidovanya gas company and affiliated business people organized a scheme to inflate the cost of materials used for gas production. The SBU said MSN a criminal mechanism at JSC Ukrgazvidovanya, which caused over $295 million $6.7 million in losses to the state, was neutralized following comprehensive measures. Ukrgazvidovanya officials and affiliated entrepreneurs were the organizers of the scam, according to law enforcement officers' investigation. Unmasking the anonymous hosts of Russians with Attitude, a show in favor of the Russian war of aggression podcast popular with U.S. far-right. The Kyiv Independent, in collaboration with the Independent Osint Group TUA Research, has unmasked the anonymous creators of the Russians with Attitude podcast as Russian attacks on the railways of Ukraine intensify. Passenger trains now targets for drones. Russian attacks on the railways of Ukraine are escalating and posing a more direct threat to civilians as Moscow increasingly shifts from hitting infrastructure to targeting moving trains, including passenger trains. Webisode 57DHYAFZZFLS. January 11, 2026 Congress is racing to undo thousands of cuts to federal science programs. Cartoon 1 of 5 Congress is racing to undo thousands of cuts to federal science programs. Cell 1 The current government bid for an overall cut in scientific funding to $154 billion from $198 billion would be a plunge of 22%. Cell 2 This week, the Senate Appropriations Committee released a bipartisan package of bills. Cell 3 that largely scraps the current government-planned cuts to federal science programs. Cell 4 Congress will set aside roughly $188 billion for federal research. Cartoon 2 of 5 Congress is racing to undo thousands of cuts to federal science programs. Cell 1 $188 billion for federal research will only be a drop of 4%. Cell 2 This rejects the current government push to let our competitors do laps around us. Cell 3 Last year, the current government administration called for a cut in federal basic research of more than 1/3. Cell for the current government sought even larger cuts for the National Science Foundation, which sponsors much of the nation's basic research. Cartoon 3 of 5 Congress is racing to undo thousands of cuts to federal science programs. Cell 1 The current government proposed that the National Science Foundation NSF budget be slashed to $3.9 billion. Cell 2 from $8.8 billion, a drop of 56%. Cell 3 The Senate package countered with a reduction to $8.75 billion. Cell 4 or less than 1%. Cartoon 4 of 5 Congress is racing to undo thousands of cuts to federal science programs. Cell 1 The Senate package includes $24.4 billion for NASA, a 1.6% cut. Cell 2 $8.8 billion for the Environmental Protection Agency EPA, a 4% cut. Cell 3 $8.4 billion for the Department of Energy Office of Science, a 1.9% increase. Cell 4 $6.2 billion for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, roughly flat. Cartoon 5 of 5 Congress is racing to undo thousands of cuts to federal science programs. Cell 1 The Senate and the House are now not far apart for negotiations on a final budget. Cell 2 The House's moves on 2026 science budgeting add up to $185 billion, which is close to the Senate figure of $188 billion. Cell 3 But this cannot undo the damage that the current government administration frenzy of budget cutting and administrative chaos. Cell 4 brought to the nation's scientific establishment.
Webisode 57DHYAFZZFLS January 11, 2025 If science funds are restored, then fund alternatives to wood burning. Cartoon 1 of 5 If science funds are restored, then fund alternatives to wood burning. Cell 1 Fund heat pumps that work down to 40 degrees below zero and also act as air conditioners. Cell 2 Fund extending a smart electric grid everywhere, including all rural areas. Cell 3 Fund wind and solar energy sources that produce electricity sent to the smart grid. Cell 4 Fund batteries that store the electricity produced by wind and solar long-term for use in emergencies. Cartoon 2 of 5 If science funds are restored, then cut dirty energy that is now funded. Cell 1 Cut funds for biofuels such as wood stoves and wood burning for home heating. Cell 2 Cut funds for biofuels such as corn-based ethanol for automobile fuel. Cell 3 Cut funds for wood and other biofuels used to replace coal burning in industrial plants. Cell 4 Cut funds for fossil fuels as well as cut funds for biofuels. Cartoon 3 of 5 If science funds are restored, enact regulations that fund removal of indoor residential wood-burning appliances. Cell 1 Fund resident-owned Purple Air PM 2.5 monitors. Cell 2 Given free to any near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner. Cell 3 Whose wood-burning PM 2.5 emissions enter the yard of the near neighbor and sicken them. Cell 4 Use the data downloadable from the Purple Air map as evidence to shut down each indoor residential wood-burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary. Cartoon 4 of 5 If science funds are restored, enact regulations that make electric vehicles and public transport affordable. Cell 1 Reinstate rebates for electric vehicles. Cell 2 Fund high-speed electric transport that will be low cost to all. Cell 3 Enact fuel regulations to discourage production of gas-powered vehicles. Cell 4 Fund research that makes production of electric vehicles efficient and cost-effective. Cartoon 5 of 5 If science funds are restored, enact regulations that make home heating and transport by electric vehicle affordable. Cell 1 Do not allow subsidies for luxury electric vehicles. Cell 2 Do not allow subsidies for home heating for individuals making over a certain salary. Cell 3 Tax the rich to provide clean energy subsidies for the middle income and poor. Cell 4 Keep in mind that the Energy Department and the EPA should work to stop air pollution that harms human health as well as slow climate change.
Webisode 57DHYAFZZFLS January 4, 2026 Would smoke affect the family adversely? Cartoon 1 of 2 Cell 1 When you know you are not protecting your family well enough. When you replace air filters and air purifiers every month instead of every 6 months. Just do not burn wood indoors residentially to begin with. Cell 2 When you are scared whenever someone opens a window. Just do not burn wood indoors residentially to begin with. Cartoon 2 of 2 Cell 1 It gives me no great joy to say this. Smog towers do not work. Cell 2 Carbon capture does not work. Just do not burn wood industrially in place of coal to begin with.
Red Green Fox here. The quick red-green fox jumped over the barriers to clean air. Red Green Fox here. Ready to sing to you the names of the 2025 major wood-burning biomass industry subsidy opponents. 1 Biofuel Watch. 2 Bulkley Valley Stewardship Coalition of British Columbia, Canada. 3 Kommite Schön Luft, which means Beautiful Air Committee in German. 4 Dogwood Alliance. 5 Equity Group Foundation, nicknamed EGF. 6 Environmental Paper Network, nicknamed EPN. 7 Natural Resources Defense Council, nicknamed NRDC. 8 Prakaunia Narzexwissenskich Istet, which means Workshop for All Beings in Polish. 9 Rachel Carson Council. 10 Solutions for Our Climate, nicknamed SFOC.
Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. ROSEP. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions. Yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. ROSEP. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.